Hello there, welcome to another episode of Fort Triumph with Ungainly Titan, and this is not a full playthrough, it's just a brief overview, kind of the highlights or elements of the final playthrough in Fort Triumph, at least the first chapter of Fort Triumph. I decided not to do a full playthrough because the final battle is, the final battle itself is a separate issue. And I'll have more to say about that. But there's essentially two parts to the finale. There's the intense battle that's taking place with the legions of the Necromancer on the walls of Fort Triumph. And that is just spoke about there. And this is obtained, you basically get clearance. This is unlocked, should we say. Yes, the word I think I'm looking for. It is unlocked when you have faced down and defeated the minions, the undead party that's sent to recruit you to the legions of the undead the old-fashioned way by killing you first and then making you minions called the agoraphobic. So you beat the minions as I showed in the previous video. And then you gain access to the actual bridge to Fort Triumph. And once you gain access to the bridge to Fort Triumph, you go past the various dialogues and you finish up on the walls of Fort Triumph, as we see here. And essentially it's the same thing over and over again. It's a long, kind of narrow corridor fight. It's very cluttered. There's lots of terrain features. In fact, I think there's too much terrain features. And in some ways, it's not a fight you can sleepwalk through. It's not an easy fight, but it's not a difficult fight either. It's not a terribly challenging fight, I think, in many respects. Once you keep your wits about you and you don't do anything monumentally stupid, you should be able to complete this fight without too much difficulty. And you should have plenty of resources at this point as well, because you should have picked up fair amount of healing potions, or at least the wherewithal to buy a fair amount of healing potions if you haven't already picked them up as the course of your adventures and random encounters on the world map. So I'm not going to show the whole battle in sequence because it took me an hour, or perhaps over an hour, to complete this section of the map, somewhere around that kind of ballpark figure. Maybe less than an hour actually, because there was more in the video as well than just the final battle. But the original piece of footage I had recorded to show here was over an hour long. And I'm just skipping through different bits. So you clear the first section of wall, you clear out the undead, and you're never facing large numbers of undead at any given time, so it's generally a manageable challenge. And you come to a section of wall with a tower and a gate, or a kind of an elevated structure with a gate that leads from beneath. And when you come to these gates, you'll find allies behind the gates, and you must open the gates to give them access to the walls of Fort Triumph so they can assist you in clearing out the undead and in securing Fort Triumph from the armies of the undead. So the first gate, once you've cleared out the guy, it turns out to be Father Stevens, the guy you met at the very start in the village, and who has been communicating with you on and off about things in the world and stuff that he's been discovering, hinting at bigger and badder problems. So Father Stevens is under the gates, so if you go to the big wheel thing on top, you can release Father Stevens. You need to be a little bit careful with the wheel thing on top, because if you drift too far over to the other side, you trigger another fight. You got to be ready for that. Father Stevens is added as a controllable member of your party, so that is a big boon, because Father Stevens has a pretty strong heal spell. So at that point, you've got essentially an unlimited healing resource, and the fight actually becomes, if anything, easier. I think one of the reasons that it's a relatively easy fight is it's a narrow front. So essentially, if you just advance forward with your melee guys and you make liberal use of Brace and Overwatch, the bad guys can't really get past the melee guys to get into your ranged fighters. And as you come to each set of gates, there are 3 of these gates. The next set you get Cole the Scavenger, and Cole the Scavenger also joins your party. as a controllable member. But he brings along a couple of minions. So you have now Father Stevens, yourself, Cole the Scavenger, the original party, and 3 minions or something like that, who act on their own. They act as their own turn between you and the undead. But they will engage in the fight as well. So now you have a fairly large horde of people on your side, and you've made it through the gate. You recruit them, and there's a third gate where you have the magic user that you sided with. So depending on which side you took, I presume you'll get one or the other. So in our case, it would be we open the third gate, and it is what's his name, Applestan Grindelweaver, I think is his name. Abstavan Grindelweaver joins the party, and at that point it's pretty much over because there's only a small amount of undead left in the last section of the tower. There is a final gate section, but there's nobody in it. And you just clear out the remaining undead, and you have completed that section of the or that particular encounter. And that is essentially it opens up the gateway to the final confrontation with Claude the Agoraphobic. Now, I don't really have an issue with this fight. It's sound enough. It does the job that it kind of needs to do from a narrative perspective, and it is not like it could be tougher, but it doesn't have to be. It's okay the way it is. What I do have an issue with is the finale, and the finale changes kind of the context of this fight. The finale, and the other thing I have an issue with is that they're about to mention now the Finite Stone and the Finite Gauntlet. So this section, when completed, leads to the final boss fight with the Claude the Agoraphobic and his minions in the interior of the fort. And this, that's what I said, changes the kind of the context of this fight. This fight is okay as it stands if the final boss fight was what you'd expect in a boss fight. And in my opinion, it's not. The other problem then is this bit here with the world map. Now, I've no problem with you using the world map to move to the final section, but this turn, this bad guys acting turn of the final map shouldn't happen. No, it's kind of a distraction. It's unnecessary. It robs the thing of a certain amount of tension, and it implies there's a lot more time going on, or the fort is a lot bigger than as one would reasonably expect. I think you should be able to move from the front gate of the fort to the interior of the fort without passing a full day-night cycle. So it should be just straight in from the initial fight into the final boss fight, and we're now into the final boss fight. So I found this fight to be particularly easy. To be sufficiently easy to be, I would consider a disappointment. I would have expected more from the final boss fight in a video game. And I think, that each chapter, depending on how many chapters the thing comes out with at the start, but even it's still a boss fight. It should be a boss fight, or else it should be a subversion of the trope in some fashion. And it's neither at the moment. The reason I bring in the subversion of the trope business is there's this whole business of the Finite Gauntlet and the Finite Stone. We have one, we don't know what it does, and it's not even in our inventory, as far as I remember. It doesn't show up in the inventory, but we have it, we know about it, and it doesn't do anything further. So it is very possible, it would be actually very funny, I think, if you come in here, have a rather simple, relatively trivial fight with Claude the Agoraphobic, but the fight is interrupted, or the fight as it ends is actually interrupted, shall we say, by a more powerful being. We won't call him Thanos, who portals in, takes out Claude, his minions, and renders the party helpless, and takes the finite gauntlet and the finite stone, and passes some remark indicating that this is, I don't know, the source of ultimate power or something like that, and whatever, and gives the party a clue, leaves something that leads on to the next section of the story. It's a kind of, would be a subversion of the existing boss fight trope, in the sense you don't really have a boss fight. It turns out he's not the boss, he's just a wannabe, and is largely unaware of what's going on. Whereas at the moment, as a fight, it was a bit in the meh side. Now, it's possible that that's a function of the leveling up process and the degree at which the amount of powers that were unlocked by the stage that I got to the fight. It is definitely possible that somebody could arrive to this fight with a lot less unlocked powers than I had, because I took my time. I didn't just do the bare minimum of the contracts that were set out in front of me. I wandered the countryside. I engaged in a lot of unnecessary fights, purely for the fun of it. So I was possibly over-leveled for this encounter. That is a possibility. But if it's a possibility that I'm over-leveled for the encounter, then there's either a problem with the combat scaling, or I shouldn't be possible for me to be that over-leveled, that I should be capped earlier, and the scaling needs to be re-looked at. I'm not too sure exactly what happened here, but I think that I definitely found this fight to be anticlimactic. It was much easier than the previous fight, the one on the walls, which I didn't think was a particularly difficult fight. If this was a difficult fight, the one on the walls would have been fine. If this was a really hard fight, then the one on the walls is fine. But as the fight stands, this is a bit on the easy side. Now, the other alternative, I suppose, would be to make it that resources spent on the wall remain spent in here, so you don't regenerate hit points, you don't get extra potions. You should probably get the world map section just to have an opportunity to redistribute stuff from the party inventory to everybody else's individual slots. So I think the encounter with Claude needs more Cowbell, whether in the direction of increased combat capability and a more dramatic encounter, or the encounter increased farce, maybe, I don't know, or maybe a bigger dungeon, more elements to the encounter, more than one fun fight with Cloud, like maybe you attack him and he disappears and reappears, something like that. It also would allow you to, I think, spread out the dialogues, especially the ones with the storyteller where there's kind of a bit of info dumping going on, because I know cutscenes are the normal means of communicating dramatic background stuff to the player in games, but they're normally done with bigger budgets where the game is the cutscene is completely cinematic. I think when you're doing it with text, to avoid a wall of text, you need to space out those text interludes a bit more, and maybe just design the fight around the storytelling so that you have more opportunities to avoid very large, substantial walls of text to be dropped in front of the player. On that note, I don't actually have much to say. I look forward to a more polished version of this. I'm definitely interested in seeing how they're going to look at the story. I know it's a planned thing to be done. But thank you for watching. I hope people found the video interesting and liked it. If you do, please like and share. Feel free to subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you all again soon. And yeah, definitely more Cowbell.